people like to be challenged emotionally, and the readers are the same way. If you tell them they can't read The Wild, guess what? They're going to read it because they can. So they do like to be challenged. I've had people, because a lot of people say, well, people with any kind of triggers or bad history in their life can't read those types of books. But I absolutely disagree, because a huge, huge, huge portion of my readers are people that have gone through terrible, terrible things in their life. And they don't want to read about the really super, happy, easy stories, because that's not how their life was.
Welcome to the Author Like a Boss podcast, the podcast for indie authors who want to improve their writing, up-level their marketing, make money with their books, and have fun doing it. Now, on to the show with your host, Ella Barnard.
Hello, everybody. Hello, bosses. We're here today with K Webster. Oh, I'm so excited. Okay, K Webster is a USA Today bestselling author. Her titles have claimed many bestseller tags in numerous categories, are translated in multiple languages, and have been adapted into audiobooks. She lives in Tornado Alley with her husband, 2 children, and her baby dog named Blue. When she's not writing, she's reading, drinking copious amounts of coffee, and researching aliens. Welcome to the show, Kay.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. It's ridiculous how excited I am. Okay. Yeah. But let's not talk. Let's like move on from my excitement and nervousness and allow you the space for your excitement and nervousness.
Thanks.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your author journey?
Sure. I've always been a total book nerd ever since I was old enough to hold a book. So reading all the time. But and it was always in the back of my head, like, I always wanted to write a book, but it just seemed, on TV, they've got their typewriters and their, a million sheets of paper, and they keep crumpling them up. And I thought that just seems really daunting. But it wasn't until December of 2013 that a friend invited me to a book signing at Barnes & Noble. And so I went with her, and I got to hear some Abby Glines, Jamie McGuire. I got to hear like their journeys and what they did. And then it kind of inspired me a little bit. And then I had my friend tell me that she was writing a book. And I thought, well, she's not a book nerd like me. Like, she likes books, but she doesn't love books like me. And if she's writing a book, why can't I write a book? And so I started picking her brain about basically, how are you doing this? What are you doing? And by the time we got back home, I already had a story in my head, and I opened my computer and I typed up that story, and 10 days later I had a book, and I never stopped. 6 years later, and I'm still just writing like crazy because it's fun and I love it. So
wow, 10 days later.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't like this huge long book, but it was a story. I mean, it was my first book, and I was really, really proud of it. And I actually didn't publish that one first. I ended up writing another one right after that and published that one first in February. But it just was, I never stopped.
I love that, because I love books. Like, I love. I'm totally resonate with you there, because yes. I really love books and reading, but I've always been a little intimidated by writing. Oh my gosh. And so I'm just now, like, I've written a few nonfiction books, but I feel like that's not the same. Like, that's not the same, just because it's not what I always was dreaming of. Right. Like, I wasn't like, what if I could write a nonfiction? I was never thinking that. So emotionally. Yeah, exactly. But so I've just started writing some fiction short stories. And I'm cool. Like, oh.
Do it. You got this.
Yeah, I got it. Okay. So 6 years, though, that's not that, like I'm like 2013. This is because I'm older, right? I'm like, that's not that long ago.
I feel the same.
And then I know, like, some kids are like, I was a teenager in 2013. I'm not.
Right.
Yeah.
I hear that.
So how many books do you have out now ish?
I am coming up on 100 books. So I would say by, I don't know, before summer hits, I should have 100 books published, because I'll have, within the next few months, I'll have that. So.
Wow.
yeah, it's fun.
Okay. Are you, because I was chatting with my friend last night and I was like, I am interviewing. I was like, what would you ask her? Because she's been writing longer than I have. And she was like, is she a pantser or a plotter? And I was like, I don't know. So
That's a good question.
With that level of speed especially makes me curious. Like 100 books, that especially makes me curious.
Well, I would lean toward being a pantser. Mm-hmm. Like I have a very loose story in my brain, and sometimes I jot down, like maybe 2 paragraphs that kind of summarizes the whole book, and then I just start writing. And I feel like anytime that I've tried to outline and plot like really heavy duty, I get stumped and stuck because I feel forced into that thing that I said I was going to do. And even though when I started writing the story, it's evolved and turned into something else, and I'm still trying to wedge it into this thing. And so if I don't make it so strict on myself, then I can just fly through and write whatever I want and just go whatever direction I want. So pantser definitely is more me.
Okay. Yeah. I think, I'm doing outlining pretty extensively right now, but at other times when I've tried, I'm outlining very extensively. I'm writing short story romances. So I'm like outlining each chapter, each of the 7 chapters and the whole of the 10,000 words.
Yeah. So you're writing more of an outline than the story.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm like, man, not that much of an outline. It's an extensive outline because the story is so short.
Yeah.
Like really, it's just an idea. But I like having the freedom because when I feel like I'm constrained, I don't have I'm like, but then I don't get a play. Then it's not as playful, I think.
Right. Exactly. I feel the same way.
Okay. So, but you do have like a general idea of like the climax. Like you're like, here's the setting.
Right.
Here's what's the intention.
Exactly. Like whenever I come up with a story, I basically have it inside my head, like a little movie. And anytime I'm in the car, I'm thinking my movie over and over and over again. And I get to those climax points in my head and I'm seeing them talk them out and the stuff they're going to say and all this stuff. And so that way, whenever I go back to write, I basically replay that scene in my head. So it's like, I guess it's kind of like outlining in my head, but I don't write it down.
Yeah. I have another person who I interviewed who said that they play it out in their heads. Mm-hmm. And yeah, anyways, that's very, okay. Thank you for sharing because everybody wants to know like how other people do it. And I like to find out, not because I think that's the way that everybody should be doing it, but because there's so many different ways.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So many different ways. Okay. So this is now I'm going to ask, so I haven't read all of your stories because I didn't realize there was almost 100. like I didn't find you that long ago.
Right. Yeah. It's going to take a while to catch up.
Yeah. I mean, I read a lot, but I also didn't realize there was almost 100 and I found you like this year. So,
okay.
But the ones that I have read are like not your typical romance topics. Are you okay talking about?
Yeah.
I figure you are because I'm like, she has a picture, like not even like an avatar, like a real picture of her.
Yeah, that's me. I talk about all my books. I'm proud of them all, even the ones that get grief.
Yes. Okay. So, what appeals to you? Like, what is there's no judgment here because I like your books. So what is it that you're like, oh, I really want to write this story?
Well, I like to, it all starts from reading. So first and foremost, I'm a reader. I love to read books, but I don't like reading the same thing over and over again. So, before I ever picked up a romance book, I read horror and thrillers and suspense and just, apocalyptic type stuff. So my basically what I'm built up of is darker themes. And so that was always like my love. Then I found love stories and I was like, wow, this is really amazing. And then it was like, I craved this blend of the two. And so, I started reading, and there were books out there that blended both, both of those themes that made me very happy. But then there was also like books that I kind of craved or liked that weren't out there. And so like with The Wild, I hadn't read anything with those kinds of themes. And there was these characters that started forming in my head. And I thought, well, I'm going to give them a story, like there's nothing out there like that. So why don't I write it? Cause that's kind of how a lot of my books start out, because I want to read it. You know what I'm saying? So it's something I want to read, but it's not out there. So, and a lot of times with some of the taboo subjects, you get books out there that are just all the kinkiness, but no like emotion and story and depth. Right. And so I wanted to like bring those kind of stories that still had the heat and everything, but it also had like this undying epic love that threaded it all together and made you just really root for them, even though it's not something you would root for in everyday life.
Yes. I was telling my husband last night, and he's like very conservative, very like I'm very liberal, and I'm like, yeah, anything. I'm like, anything goes when you're reading. It's a book, right. And he's very. So I was telling him about. I read this last weekend, the first 3 War and Peace books, and I'm like, this is, and then this, and then this. And he's like, whoa. And I'm like, yeah, but the crazy. He's like, that's twisted. And I'm like, yeah, but the crazy. I'm like, but what makes it so good and why I'm geeking out so much is like, because it's a love story. Like, she makes you root for the characters, even when they're kind of evil. Right. Because like my motto is villains need love too. Yeah, and that's why I'm geeking out, because I'm like, even when you shouldn't, you still want them to have a happy ever after. Right. And she does it like with this really like it's a romance. It's a romance still. Right. So that's why I'm geeking out, and I love that. Yeah, because I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so fun. What? Now my next question is though. Because one of the things I was like, how does she deal with this? Like, because a lot of writers are very creative and very sensitive. So I'm going to shift to the kind of emotional and mental side. Sure. Like when you have a negative response, which you have on some people, like how do you, I guess, is how you deal with it now different than how when you first dealt with it? Or like, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Whenever I first started out, and I wrote a lot of contemporary romance because that's what, when I started writing, that's what everybody else told me I should write. And, I was trying to fit in and learn the ropes and kind of find out who I was as a writer. And so I obeyed the rules and did what everybody else was doing. But then, and I would get reviews still that were, this person can't write, she can't do this, she can't do that. And, it would upset me and I'd get my feelings hurt. But then I started getting braver and kind of getting comfortable in my writing skin. And so I started taking these little leaps, and I was really surprised when people were there to jump with me. And so I got encouraged by my readers that they liked these kinds of books that I also like to read and now write. And so they kind of gave me they were my little cheerleaders and kept me to, want to write these things. So then when it just kind of grew from there, and whenever I wrote The Wild and it got like such a big social media thing, it was really hard to stay positive during that time, just because, you can ignore reviews and stuff, but that's by staying off Goodreads or whatever, and you don't have to see the negative stuff. But when the negative stuff is like being thrown at you, it's a little bit harder to ignore it, Mm-hmm. And so it was a very like trying, stressful time for me. Mm-hmm. But I had a very good support system. And the thing that really honestly kept me going was my sales, because no matter what was being said about me publicly, like really hatefully or whatever, my sales just kept going cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. So the readers were showing their support through their pocketbooks, whether or not they actually went out there and defended me or whatever. That a lot of people don't want to do that. I personally am not that kind of person. I stay quiet and I don't get into drama and stuff. And so, but they supported me through buying my book. And so Amazon banned it and the other retailers banned it. So I put it on my website. And to this day, The Wild's one of my best-selling books on my website. And it just dings all day where people download buy the books and the paperbacks too. So
wow.
It's it kind of, when you're feeling down, it'd be one thing if, the book got banned and you couldn't sell it, nobody wanted it, then you'd feel like, oh gosh, what did I do? Mm-hmm. But when your readers are constantly saying, I want more, I love that story, that's my first intro to you, that, like, are you going to write any more books like that? Like, when they're constantly coming at you with that, and then also buying the books and buying the book for their friend and buying the book for their grandma, and you're just like, oh my gosh. And so it, like, the support is there. So I've just kind of learned that, maybe there are some people that speak loud or have a big platform to speak negatively about you, but it doesn't mean that everybody thinks like them, because, I would say 1% of the response I got from the wild was negative, and that was the loud percent that everybody saw. But the others, I had huge authors messaging me saying, "You've got this. You're doing amazing. We're so proud of you." They don't want to go on their platform and do that. I get it, because it's business, and I don't do that either. But the support was there. It's just like hidden support. So it's easy to ignore those negative things when you have so much positive pouring in. And, I got like an agent from it. There's really positive things that happened through a very negative time. And so it doesn't feel so bad for me. Like, it feels like a win, So, yeah, and I don't let it get me down, because, and now going forward, since that book, if I have negative response to a book or a negative review, I just think, oh well, because for every negative one, there's 10 more that are like, that was the best book I ever read. So I just tune it out and, just try not to think about it. So
I love that. I love you, like, reframed, like, there's certain reviews and certain people, but look at the pocketbook. like they're like, yes, they're still people are still buying, and that is actually more concrete support, right? Because they're like, they had to go to work for some amount of time, somebody had to earn that money, and then they decided to spend it on you.
Right. And they didn't just like have to go to another platform. Like, they had to learn a new way to buy. Like, they had to go to my website. They had to learn how to pay through PayPal. They had to learn how to download it to their device. You're talking a huge learning curve that people were there for it. Like, it was mind boggling to me that they, cause I'm like tech challenged. So for me, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the worst day of my life. I don't know how to do this. But everybody else they were very tech savvy, and they were there for it. So I'm not tech savvy,
but I'm relatively tech savvy, but I read everything on my Kindle, and I went and The Wild is the only thing I have in my iTunes.
Oh yeah.
Or my iBooks. It's the only, the only book. Yeah. I'm like, I want to go reread The Wild. And I go and I open my iBooks, and it's easy to find because it's the only thing there.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because, like, so many people, they went and learned for this book. So it's just, I don't know, it just makes me proud.
Yeah. And that kind of, well, you should be proud. You should be proud, because that's, but I do understand why people aren't as vocal, because that's a very polarizing, it's like rhubarb.
Right. Yeah.
Except like times 100. It's it's a very polarizing kind of topic. And and not in drama. Yeah, I'm not a fan of drama either. So I see, but that's so good. Oh, I love the indie author community. I really love it, like, generally.
Right. They do, and they show up for it. And even though that time was like really dark and stressful for me, and I didn't let any of it go out onto social media. I just kind of kept it with me. And I had like my husband and my friends that were like, you got this, kind of patting me on the back every single day to keep me going. And then, I turned around and I took all those emotions that were boiling inside of me and all the stuff that I had had to deal with, like the negative, mean people, I took all of those emotions and I wrote another book, because that's what we do. It's our therapy. And so I wrote The Day She Cried using the emotions from The Wild. And I wrote a book about cyberbullying, basically. There's a huge theme of cyberbullying in there. And I let all those feelings pour out into that book. And a lot of people were just like, oh my God, that's one of my favorite books. I cried so much, blah, blah, blah. So
oh my gosh.
it just kind of, it's weird how we're inspired.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. That is so awesome. Okay. I have another writing question before I want to move over, because I am very curious about the having people buy books on your website, but I'm not going there yet because I don't want to leave the writing topic. Okay. How do you write your super, how do you make your scene so hot, Christy?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I've just got a really vivid imagination.
Because for a lot of people, I'm not saying it's myself, maybe, I don't know,
Yeah.
I'm I get to the thing and then I'm like, okay, there's not that many words to use for women's private parts.
Right. Yeah.
I'm like, why aren't there that many words? And so many of them are really cheesy, scientific sounding or cheesy or, and then I get stuck because I'm I literally get stuck on what do I call this?
Right.
Because I feel there's X-rated, which I don't mind sometimes, but not every book calls for X-rated.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Or you're going to medical school, but there's not a very big in between.
Right. I agree.
And so I'm I get stumped on that, and then it takes away all of the sexy whateverness that I'm trying to write, because I'm stumped around just the words to use. Well, so that's me. I mean, not me, somebody. Whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Somebody, whatever. Yeah. But so is there anything that you do to get yourself into a really great spot, or is it you've already what's your process around that, if you have one?
Okay, I'm going to tell you right now, writing the steamy scenes is the easiest part for me. I've fallen asleep writing steamy scenes and woke up the next day and thought, well, dang, that was hot. I just close my eyes almost and write them, because it's just, I don't know. That is a simple thing for me, because, well, and like you said, you get stuck on a word. Well, next time, just choose one word that you always use and stick it in there. And then later you can, after you've written the whole scene, you can go back in there and search for that one particular word and then maybe switch them out. And then you won't waste all that time agonizing over that word. But, I mean, I read a lot, like we said, and something, I read something the other day and it kind of hit home with me, and it was from Quentin Tarantino, and it was a quote from him. And he said, because before he ever was a screenwriter and director and all this, he worked at a video store, and he was the guru of all the books or all the movies. He'd watched them all. He knew everything about all of them. And so when people ask him, well, where do you get your ideas? He says, well, I just steal a little bit from every movie I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. And so it makes sense, because you're reading all these books and you're seeing things that you like in certain books. So you're like, oh, I really loved when he got all growly and said all this, during this moment, and it was so possessive. And so you kind of pull that in and keep that as one of your favorite things that you like in a steamy scene. Mm-hmm. Or, she, whatever, I liked this, I liked that. And you mm-hmm. kind of start building your own favorites in your head, and they become yours, and it's your own style, I suppose. And so it's basically like Quentin Tarantino said. I mean, you just kind of learn as you read other things, and it's definitely not stuff I pull from everyday life. It's definitely not.
I would have been so jealous.
That's the dream world.
I'd have been so jealous if you're I'm like, how do you get the steamy scenes? And you're like, oh, my husband.
Yeah. No, a funny story is one time I was trying to figure out a position, and I was like, oh, can you come over here and we'll just act it out? And he looked at me and says, no. And walks off. And I was like, well, fine, I'll have to figure it out on my own.
Oh, I'd have been so jealous. I've been I am jealous of your writing ability on these. You're just I'm I can do it with my eyes closed and all halfway asleep. Actually, that might be the best way to do it, if I was halfway asleep, because the critical voice kind of disappears.
Right. Don't think about it.
Yeah. Okay. And I do love the growly possessive thing, so I'm going to have to I like that. And it could probably, I'm feeling encouraged.
Yes, you should.
I'm feeling encouraged. Like I can take little bits of things from other people and make them my own, and gradually over time it will really just become my own.
Right. You're just finding the things that you love in a story, whether it be like the way he, kind of, nuzzles her hair or whatever, or just little things like that just are favorites in a love story, even on movies and stuff, the way they look at each other, the way they talk to each other. You just pay attention and you start to know what you like as a reader, and you keep that in your bank as for what you write.
Yeah. So. Okay. Okay. Like part of me, I know there's not really a good way to answer that question exactly, but I keep, I think, hoping that somebody's going to be like, oh, well, you just ABC.
Right.
Step one, step two, step three.
Right. It's more of for me, it's more of a feeling than a technical thing.
Yeah.
So it's just, I just get in the mental mood for it. So.
Yeah. Okay. I like it. That's good. That's good enough. I mean, obviously it's working for you. So
yeah,
I'll just get into the mental mood for it and do it. Done.
Right. Yeah. Don't agonize over it.
Okay. So now I want to kind of jump into a little bit of like marketing and stuff. And so I'm curious about are all of your books, like how many of your books, do you have your books in Kindle Unlimited, or do you have them all, or are they all wide?
It's a mix. I have some in Kindle Unlimited and some wide. It's just a mix across the board.
Do you know, can you share like why some, not beyond the one that have been banned, but go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, are you saying like why I have some in Kindle Unlimited and some not? Well, for one, after that whole thing with the wild, I didn't completely like the idea of having all my eggs in one basket because it made me very nervous because, and especially you see people all the time that get their accounts taken away for no reason. And I just, that kind of thing makes me really nervous. And so I'm what you would call like a doomsday prepper. So like in my life, I prepare for everything ahead of time. And so mentally, whatever. And so, I just try to think ahead and think, okay, well, if is there any way that this could be seen as a problem? And if it is, am I limiting myself to just this one place? And, I try to give myself options and to be quite honest, I feel like I make more money, going wide. Not that I sell tons on the other sites. I make almost 99% of that from Amazon. But just the fact that I'm not married to Amazon helps me. And then also, I mean, I think because my books, usually range from like the 230 to 280 range, that's pages. So they're not like super long 400-page books. So when you're putting something in Kindle Unlimited and your book is, 210 pages, the pages read isn't very many. So I started thinking, well, maybe if I just do it wide and just get the sale, it might do better for me. And so far, I mean, I've kind of been testing that out this year. And so far, wide has done better for me than Kindle Unlimited. But there are some that I still stick in Kindle Unlimited because of like maybe they're a part of a series or a set or something that's already that way. And I try to keep them streamlined. So,
yeah. Okay. And how are people, like, I have not done a whole lot of wide stuff because mostly I've been working with people who are pretty new. And I'm like, when you're new, I think it's wise to be in Kindle Unlimited because it's like fewer barriers to people reading you and discovering you.
Right. Show up more. Right. Exactly.
Like don't put a barrier in between you and your first, and your first 1,000. Right. Or whoever have 100 fans. But but so when you go, like, how is it all? Do you think it's already your reader base? Like you already have a reader base who are waiting for your books, or
I think so. I think a lot of it is because and that I have somebody who helps me with ads, and she says all the time, you have a very loyal reader base that's just very organic. Like whenever you say you're going to have a book out there, they go and buy it or pre-order it, and it's all your people. And so, and so for me, like, my struggle is my backlist. And so I'm like, oh, new book. And I'm hitting all those readers that I have, and they're the loyal ones that keep buying. And so it's kind of like, I mean, I don't know. It's just, I don't really know.
I see. So you have almost 100 books. That's a lot. And your people who have read your books already love them. And so they buy every book that you put out. But you're not necessarily, you're telling me that you would like to somehow get new people reading your backlist and making more money.
Right. But it's like, I don't really know how to do that. So I just keep hustling it forward, doing what I know, which is, giving my base what they want. So what they don't know they want.
Well, and you have like such a different, like if you have like contemporary romance backlist and like cyberbullying and like
historical romance,
a number
alien,
of
like
that's harder.
Yeah. Because then you're basically, my reader base is made up of a bunch of small groups of people. So like I've got the people that love the really taboo books, but they, don't care nothing about rom-com. And then I've got my rom-com lovers who love my rom-coms, but wouldn't touch my dark romance with the 10-foot pole. So, and then I've got my dark romance readers who are actually the most well-rounded, that will read almost all of it. And so a lot of times, like maybe your alien readers will also read dark romance, or your taboo readers will also read dark romance. So it's kind of like some of those blend together, and Mafia would read, taboo, or so some of those do kind of intersect and you have the same people, but it's a lot of small groups of people. So like every time I write a book, I don't think, oh, I'm going to try to market to all 26,000 people that follow me on Facebook, because I know that, not everybody's going to like reverse harem. So, you know what I'm saying? So I just think this is for the reverse harem readers. Or when I wrote The Free, which is a follow-up for The Wild, I think this is for all the dark taboo, readers. So I don't think it's for everybody. I never go into it thinking it's for everybody. So I don't have these like really high expectations.
Okay. Yeah. Oh. Wait, how many books do you release in a year now ish?
Last year I did like 28, I think, and the year before I did like 18.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
But you got to think some of those are co-writes, which believe it or not, are they're still hard because you're trying to blend two voices into one book. And then when you're doing it with several different people, you're really changing the way you do things for each person because everybody's different. And and some of them will be, a shorter book, and some of them be a big long humdinger, and some of them be a part of a series. So it's just kind of like variety.
Okay. I would like to, are you willing to talk about, I just want to, I have notes here, and before, like I'm focused on the conversation. I'm really loving what we're talking about, but I also like want to stop and be like, hey everybody, she does have a book called Pause to Prolific that she hasn't mentioned because she's very humble and like she's not mentioned it yet. I've read it 3 times in the last couple weeks because I keep on being like, I need to refresh myself before this interview. And then I'm like, which squirrel is it? I don't know. I can't remember the squirrel, but it's a really nice little thing about how to write faster, which is part of the topic that we're talking about right now. Okay. Pause to Prolific, 28 books last year, some of them co-written, but it's still a heck of a lot of writing. And it's very enjoyable and gives you kind of some insight into how K Webster keeps on getting so much done. But obviously you can hear, and this wasn't in the book, that's like she loves what she's doing. There's definitely like a love squirrel.
Right. Yes. Definitely.
Behind all the squirrels, the mama squirrel is the
right.
And you'll get you'll get the squirrel reference if you read the book. Okay. Yeah. Do you mind if I ask you a little bit about co-writing?
Sure.
Hey, what oh gosh, so many questions. Okay. Why do you co-write?
Okay, first question, why do I co-write?
Yeah.
Because I think that writing is a very lonely job. And I came from a profession where I worked with lots of people and went to lunch with my friends all the time and was used to talking to people all day. And while social media brings you that, there's a different kind of thing with working on a project with somebody. It's just kind of fun. And so I strictly do it for fun, to do something different and to do something with my friends.
Next question. How did you meet your friends? How did you meet these other authors?
Well, okay, so for one, Kara Duki, she and I wrote the Pretty Stolen Dolls series and a bunch of other books. And she's a dark romance author. And there was actually a dark romance group. And every time they would have these things like, who would you pair up to write a dark romance? And everybody kept putting us together. And so I always teased that we're an arranged marriage, and then we fell in love. And so she reached out to me and said, people keep tagging us. Is this something you want to try? And I was like, sure. And as soon as we started discussing storylines, it was like talking to the other half of my brain. And it was just spooky how we thought so in line with each other. And it was fun.
Whoa. So you're like, we need to do that just because it's fun.
Right. Yeah, we had a really good time. And I mean, we had to learn a lot of things along the way about how to blend voices and learn how to work together. But, now I talk to her almost every day and several times a week on the phone. And she's like a sister to me. So, I mean, we literally went from strangers to sisters.
Yeah. What kind of, I've asked a few people who co-write this because I'm always curious about how people do it. Like some people, one writes an outline. That's usually when you have a really successful author bringing in another newbie author. But some people are just one chapter each. Some people are, there's a number of different ways. I'm curious about and it's maybe it's different for each one, but which ones do you do and which one's your favorite? Not the authors, the styles of the co-writing.
Well, since me and Kara started first, the way we did it was she and I just write till we got tired because she's in the UK and it's really hard to stay on the same schedule. Oh. So where she could write all through the evening, her evening, it's the middle of my day and I'm doing stuff, and so it was easier to let her write until she went to bed and then passed it back to me. And so that might be 3 chapters or whatever. And so that's how our style was for the longest time. And then we did another little series that we just did back and forth chapters. And that's typically how I do it with my other co-writers. We each take a point of view and I usually take the guy's point of view because I really like writing the male point of view. And so, and then we just take turns.
Yeah.
So, and it takes a lot of, we talk about what's going to happen and then that person goes and writes the chapter and then they come back and you read it and then you talk about again, what I liked about this chapter, what I think we should change about this chapter, and what do we do in the next chapter? Okay.
That was the other part I was going to ask about is the organization. Because I would imagine it's harder to lean towards pantsing when you're co-writing.
Right. You definitely have to have short-term outlining. And I have some co-writers who are extensive outliners, like Nikki Ash. She wrote Heath with me and then the Stolen Lies and Hidden Truths duet. And she's English teacher. So she's got that way about her where she's a super outliner. And a lot of times we're both like, oh my gosh, because I'm not an outliner. And so we kind of have to let each person take their strengths and the other person, where she's going to do the outlining and I just let her outline it. And then I give her feedback and she adjusts it and tweaks it and updates it and all that. So it's just, you just, like I said, every personality is a little different and you kind of have to.
Yeah. I just finished. Actually, today is a release day for me. Woohoo!
Okay, happy release
for my 3rd story.
Yay!
But I have a friend, and so we were doing a series. So we didn't co-write the stories, each story, but we each took 2 in the series, and but we write the blurbs together, and we've also been alpha reading each other's. But it's turned into kind of because it's a series, we have everything on the same street. So I'm including her characters and mine. So there's a little bit of like, okay, what's the timeline on yours? What's the da-da-da? And it's fun because as we've done it, we've realized that like I'm really good with like really cheesy romance storylines. And she's really good with like the structure, like you're supposed to have this because she has a background in editing and went to school for English, and I just am a big reader. And so it's interesting to see like both, and when we both work together, our strengths make for a really, like before we had our interview, I was reading my story because it just came out today, and I was like, I want to read it. Because I'm a dork.
No, I do the same thing.
I'm like, and I got like halfway through, and I'm like, this is so good.
Yes.
This is so good. I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope my next one can be as good.
Right.
And then I'm like, I'm a real writer.
Yes.
Okay. So can you tell us? Oh my gosh, you're just so like. Can I tell you how much I appreciate you right now, Christy? You're just like, yeah, I just kind of do it, and it's working. People like it.
I just very go with the flow.
Yeah, but I'm going to acknowledge there's a lot of bravery and courage in putting out the stories that you put out, and then being like, well, people like them, and working through whatever the backlash is going to be. Like
I have a rebellious streak. My mom always said that I am stubborn to a fault. So if people say that you can't write those things, well, by God, I'm going to write them because I can write those things because I don't see why I can't. So if you tell me I can't do something 9 times out of 10, I'm going to try to figure out a way to do it and show you that I can do it, in a very polite, professional way.
I love that because I was actually a really goody two shoes growing up. Like if circumstances required me to be almost. But then I got older, and I put a Post-it note on my computer. At some point, I put a Post-it note on my computer that said, "No, you can't," because every time I read it, I was like, "Yes, I can."
Right. Yeah.
Whereas earlier in my life, if I'd had that Post-it note, I would have been like, "You're right, I can't." Right. And now I'm like, "Nuh-uh. Yes, I can."
Yeah. Yeah, you gotta kind of like outsmart yourself.
I have a question that I've had in my mind that I keep forgetting, but now I'm going to ask again. What do you think? And you might not even be able to answer because it's like asking you about not you, but I'm asking you, like, what do you think appeals? Why do you think your readers like what you write so much? Like, especially the dark romance or the taboo. Like, what is it? Has anybody communicated with you or?
Oh, yeah. All the time. They just say that, they feel like they can connect to the story in some way, that it's not all perfect and rainbows and butterflies, that they, it's just people like to be challenged emotionally, and the readers are the same way. If you tell them they can't read The Wild, guess what? They're going to read it because they can. So they do like to be challenged. They, I've had people, because a lot of people say, well, people with any kind of triggers or bad history in their life can't read those types of books. But I absolutely disagree because a huge portion of my readers are people that have gone through terrible, terrible things in their life. And they don't want to read about the really super, happy, easy stories because that's not how their life was. And they feel connection to characters that are messing up big time and are, breaking social rules or actual laws or things like that because, you don't realize how many people have dealt with things that are in these books that you think, oh, that would never happen in a million years. Oh my gosh. Well, guess what? People have messaged me. These stories, all of the stories I've written, there are people that directly relate to these stories and have been these characters in these books. So even whereas we read it for entertainment and that's interesting and we wouldn't agree with these things in real life, there are people in real life with these issues and with these stories. And I've had people tell me, thank you for telling my story. And so people, they just connect to them in an emotional way that, and you don't even, it's not even to say that everybody that's had terrible, bad things happen to them are the only ones that like those stories, because lots of people that have had a perfect life enjoy these stories because it's just something different and outside the norm and something to get their heart pumping, Yeah.
Plus, you're an excellent writer.
Thank you.
Like all of this is within the framework of you being an excellent writer, because it doesn't matter how good a storyline you have if the writer can't make you, like, if you can't connect with the person because the writing is good, that's, and I'm saying that as somebody who's trying to become a decent writer, and I'm like, okay, like the hardest part is like in my head, I'm like, it's easy.
Yeah.
In my head, emotionally connecting to the characters is so easy, but how do I make it? Yeah, I think the thing is I absolutely love all of my characters, even the bad ones. Like, I love them. I love all of their flaws 100%, and I don't judge any of them. So when I write with that feeling. So I don't write in there going, oh gosh, God, can you believe this guy? If he was in real life, he would be going to jail and this and that. No, I don't write it like that. I write it as this character who has been dragged through the mud and his life has gotten to this point because of X, Y, and Z. And my heart hurts for him because I know how he thinks and what his heart feels like. And I let that bleed out. And so you guys feel it too when you're reading it. And so you're right there with me. Like you feel for this character the same way. And a lot of times people get mad because they don't want to feel for the character because they want to see him as a villain, and they're mad because that shouldn't have been hot. but it was, and now they're mad about it. And that's like, well, I'm sorry, but you fell in love with the character too. And even though he was messing up and doing these terrible things, you still cared about him. And that's real human nature, because if you really just put everybody out in their own little categories based on what they've messed up in life, you wouldn't have anybody that you loved or cared about, because everybody's like messed up and done things in their life that aren't okay. And so, I mean, it's just, people can relate to that. Nobody is perfect, no matter what they say or think. Oh my gosh. Amen, sister. Amen to that. In fact, like because I just said it, I read the first 3 of War and Peace this last weekend, because I was like, I'm interviewing her, I need to read. I went and I searched like, what is the top rated? And then I was like, oh, she wrote this a little while ago. It's got all 5 stars. People love it, yada, yada. And then the second one, spoiler alert, people. So if you haven't read it and you're planning on skip this minute, but like the boyfriend who I can't remember his name at the moment. Because I just yes, Brandon. Thank you. Oh my gosh, you know all your characters. Oh,
I'm surprised. That was a guess.
Okay, yeah, Brandon. Oh, I'm like, wow, because I'm like, she really does love them. She has them all in her head. I was like, the boyfriend, and she's like, Brandon.
Yeah.
Because I cried at the end of that scene that I'm not going to, but I was like, oh, even though he'd been like a total jerk face the last, and I was like, oh, he's twisted and he's broken.
Guess what? I cry too when I write those.
And I was like, but because you did a really good job of like, when she sees, she's like, he's not who he used to be, but I can still see it in him. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the kind of thing that gets me every time, that particular kind of thing.
And if you look at any villain and you see those villain origin stories, it's like they all started out as just someone wanting to be loved and wanting a place in life, and life kicked them and beat them down. And it molded and changed who they were. And it doesn't mean that at the very heart of who they are, they're just rotten to the core. Not everybody is 100% rotten. That's the way it is. I don't think it. I actually, over time, like since I've been grown up and personally, I've done a lot of soul searching, and I don't think that anybody is. No.
I really don't think anybody is. I'm like, everybody's living within a set of circumstances, and we don't know everybody's context. We don't know everybody's history. Did they have to make certain choices along the way, and one choice and another versus another choice kind of took them down that path? Absolutely.
Yep.
Like, absolutely.
It shapes who they are. And
yes.
some people, it shapes them more negatively, but it doesn't, and I think that's what's fun about writing these characters, is that even when they're 90% villain, there's still that 10% hero that's inside of them, Oh
my gosh. So great. Okay. So good. I think that falling in love with the characters, I'm going to tell you, I think it makes me want to do that with mine. Like, I'm really inspired by that. And I think that that's probably why the quality of your writing and your stories is so good, because you fall in love with the characters, and it shows.
Well, and I think what you have to do when you're thinking up your characters and everything is you have to think about them as a real person, and you think about all of their oddities and just every little quirk about them and their emotions and their behavior and everything. And then you think, this character is so real and so vivid in my mind that I could put him in any story. I could take this character and put him in the wild, or, This Is War Baby, or whatever. And they're going to stand out because they are the story. The characters are the story. And so if you go in with that, like, kind of mindset that, and have like this great love for your character and less about the actual story itself, the story will weave around the characters. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's what makes them more like interesting, I think.
Oh my gosh, that's so good, because I've been trying to write this. I'm trying to write this next story, and I've been kind of stuck. And I think it's because I need to spend a little time falling in love with the characters.
Yeah. Give them some personality.
Yeah, and it'll be so much easier.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. Okay. What is your best advice for people because the people who are listening want to be successful authors? So what's your best advice for that?
Okay. For me, it's kind of how it is with Pause to Prolific. It's just ignoring all of the chatter around you and all of the distractions and all of everything, and just staying focused on your writing. Don't even think about all the stuff that comes with being an author. It's just focus on what you started out in this to begin with, is you wanted to tell a story. So focus on that 100%, and then give your time accordingly to these other things. But then your story is just like the primary thing. It gets all of the attention and all of the love and all of the energy. And then once that's complete, then you can go and do all the other things involved, because those other things can be energy sucking and stressful and discouraging. And next thing you know, if you're right in the middle of what you're trying to do, write a story, and then you get bogged down by all these things around you, your story starts to slow down. It maybe stops. You start to lose your love for it, because it's not that you're losing the love for writing. It's that you're losing the love because of everything else around you that's distracting you. And so if you can just, like all the time people say, well, I want to be an author. And I say, well, go write a book. And they're like, well, but what do you do here? And what do you do that? How do I market myself? And I'm like, well, you are like 10 steps ahead of yourself. Like, write your book, write the story. That is the most important thing. And when you finish and you type the end, then come back to me and I'm going to tell you everything you need to know. So and so many people just get so sucked into the marketing and becoming a social media presence and, networking and, lining up editors and getting a cover and all these things. And you're like, what about your book?
Yeah, I know a handful of people, and I'm sure there's many, many more that have at least like a dozen covers and have not finished.
Right.
Or at least not published. I think maybe they have one finished on their computer. Maybe. Maybe not, but maybe. But they have all the covers and they have all the, I'm like.
And I think they just... they just fall victim to the process, and you don't have to if you just, and you're not writing if you're out there doing all these other things. And the book is that's what you're going to make your money off of eventually. So why are you spending all this time on things that don't directly attribute to your income, whereas the writing is attributing to your income.
Ooh, getting a book cover would be an excellent. Oh wait, you said reward yourself with writing, and I love that. But I might add in, like, once you finish your book, then you can buy another book cover.
Right? Yeah, that's an incentive. That's one of those like mind tricks that you do to yourself to get yourself motivated.
Because book covers you're like, ooh, that's so pretty.
Right. It is. It's distracting. Yeah.
Very distracting. Okay. So you mentioned, like, very, very subtly, you reverse harem. Now, have you written reverse harem before?
I have written it once before with Karaduki, and it was called Share Me, and we did that together. It was our first stab at reverse. Okay, so I'm going to ask, what is your latest book and where people can find you? And I have an insight. I know a little bit ahead, but can you tell us about the story a little bit? Sure. My next book that's coming out is February 24th, so it's just right around the corner, and it's called Delinquent Demons, and it is reverse harem for demons. So it's paranormal romance. I don't have tons of those, but like I always like a challenge, and so it's part of a collection where there's lots of authors writing in this prison. It's a prison like theme, I guess. And so my characters all meet in this prison, and so they said, you want to write in this, it's paranormal romance, and I was like, well, sure, like I'm always up for trying something a little bit different. And so they didn't tell me to write reverse harem, I just decided to. And and I had this other story just sitting in my head for a while that was kind of like just bare bones that I wanted to do something with. And so I was able to kind of manipulate that story in my head to fit what I wanted to do for this set. And so now it's turned out pretty awesome. So
I love reverse harem. I do. It's one of my favorite genres. I'm like, yeah, why not?
Right.
Like, I started reading Laurel K. Hamilton way back. Like very long time ago, and it wasn't called reverse harem back then. It was just Laurel K. Hamilton.
Right? Yeah. It was just naughty.
Yes, it was just naughty, and I've loved it since. And now I'm like, when I read books, I'm like, that should have been a reverse. Like, look at what's the point of a love triangle? Just take two.
Yeah, just have them all. I mean, come on now. They all love you. You love them. What's the problem?
Yes. Which I think is so fun. But I'm curious, would you say that Delinquent Demons is like paranormal romance leaning towards dark, leaning towards like, does it have a lean? It's
funny. Oh. It's surprisingly funny. And I did not go into this wanting to make it funny, but the heroine is hilarious. Her inner thoughts are what we're thinking, like, oh my gosh. And she, about, oh my gosh, I've got basically 4 boyfriends, what a hussy, what a hussy and all this. And so she's just thinking up all these things that we're kind of thinking. And she says the funniest stuff. And so I didn't expect her to be funny going into the story. So at first I kind of was like, oh my gosh, what is she doing? And then I was like, nope, I'm going to let her be funny. I'm going to let her say her things because it's good, because the overall storyline is kind of not dark. It's more like epic and intrigue, and you're trying to find out these answers. And, there's a lot of paranormal things, like they've got special powers and stuff, and they're really cool. And, they're trying to get away from the bad guys type situation. Yeah. So you've got that villainous aspect that's kind of looming over them. But then you've got the comedy that kind of just pokes in there. It's not like a rom-com, but she's just funny, and she says funny stuff the whole time. And so it kind of just gives a little bit of comedic relief. So. Oh my gosh,
that's so fun. It's so fun. Okay. I cannot wait to read it. That's my mom's birthday. So, So happy birthday, Mom. I'm buying myself a book.
Yeah. A naughty one.
A naughty one. Yeah. She knows that.
Yeah. She knows you by now.
She knows me by now. She said, like, I think I realized how much like naughty romance is part of my brand, which or identity, when my mom started buying me like summer sausages and putting them in my stocking every Christmas.
Oh my gosh.
She's like, your sausage, since you've been single for a while, here's
Oh my gosh.
And then each year they got progressively bigger and bigger.
That's funny. How funny.
Okay. Enough about me and my summer sausages.
Right?
Numerous summer sausages. Where's the best place for people to find you and to be able to access all of your stuff?
Obviously I've got most of my stuff out on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Kobo and iBooks. There's also another platform called Eden Books, and they kind of take they take all kinds of books that are romance, but they also take books like mine that aren't allowed on Amazon. And then I also sell on my website, and a lot of times people know if they're looking for a particular book of mine and they can't find it on Amazon, go to my website. It's there.
Okay. And the website is?
www.authorkwebster.com.
authorkwebster.com.
Yep.
Just the way it sounds too.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Oh my gosh, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. When you said yes, there was definitely some squeeing happening. So.
Well, I was totally nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this up here.
Well, you did wonderfully. And so I want to thank you for being here. And then I'm going to thank everybody who's listening. Thank you guys. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Hugs and happy authoring here at Author Like a Boss.
If you love the Author Like a Boss podcast, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes. Until next time.